Hello and welcome to my channel. I hope you enjoy this story. I'm going to try and upload a new story each day. The Waxworks of Notorious Criminals and Monsters. Holly Arnold stepped off the ferry onto the Isle of Wight, the crisp sea breeze doing little to calm the nervous excitement bubbling within her. As the newly appointed curator of the Isle of Wight Historical Museum, Holly had taken on the daunting task of revamping the museum's exhibits, with the latest and most ambitious addition being the Waxworks of Notorious Criminals and Monsters. The exhibit had been months in the making. Holly had travelled far and wide to collect detailed accounts and artifacts, ensuring the wax figures were as lifelike as possible. Each figure represented a notorious criminal or monster from history and legend, and their detailed biographies accompanied them, recounting their horrific deeds. Jack the Ripper, Elizabeth Bathory, Jules de Rise, and even fictional creatures like Dracula and the Wolfman, all meticulously sculpted to perfection, awaited their grand unveiling. As Holly entered the museum, she was greeted by the familiar scent of old books and polished wood. The exhibit hall was shrouded in darkness, the wax figures standing in silent anticipation under heavy curtains. Holly moved through the hall, inspecting each figure one last time before the grand opening. Everything must be perfect, she whispered to herself, adjusting Jack the Ripper's knife ever so slightly. The day of the unveiling arrived, and the museum was abuzz with excitement. Locals and tourists alike flocked to see the new exhibit, their chatter filling the air as they eagerly awaited the opening. Holly stood at the entrance, a mixture of pride and anxiety coursing through her veins. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I am honored to present to you the waxworks of notorious criminals and monsters." With a flourish, she pulled the curtain rope, revealing the figures bathed in eerie, dim light. Gasps and murmurs of woe rippled through the crowd as they took in the uncanny realism of the waxworks. The figures seemed almost alive, their eyes glinting in the low light, their expressions frozen in time. As the crowd dispersed to explore the exhibit, Holly couldn't shake an uneasy feeling that had settled in her chest. The wax figures seemed to be watching her, their eyes following her every move. She dismissed it as pre-opening jitters and busied herself with answering questions and guiding visitors. As evening fell and the museum closed its doors, Holly found herself alone in the exhibit hall, the silence pressing in on her. She wandered through the hall, her footsteps echoing off the walls. She paused in front of Elizabeth Bathory, the infamous Blood Countess, and stared into her cold, lifeless eyes. "Why do you look so real?" Holly mused aloud, a shiver running down her spine. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and a chill filled the air. Holly's breath caught in her throat as she felt a presence behind her. She turned slowly, heart pounding, but saw nothing. The museum was empty. "It's just your imagination," she told herself firmly. "You're tired, and it's been a long day." She made her way to her office, intending to gather her things and head home. As she reached for her coat, a soft whisper echoed through the hall. "Holly." She froze, the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. The voice was faint, almost indistinguishable, but unmistakably real. She turned back towards the exhibit hall, eyes wide with fear. "Is someone there?" she called out, her voice trembling. No answer came, only the oppressive silence. Holly steeled herself and walked back into the hall, her footsteps hesitant. The wax figures stood motionless, their eyes gleaming in the dim light. Holly's heart raced as she scanned the room, looking for any sign of movement. Then she saw it. Jack the Ripper's hand had moved, the knife no longer resting by his side but raised slightly, as if ready to strike. Holly's breath quickened, and she took a step back, her mind racing. "This can't be happening," she whispered. "It's just a trick of the light," but deep down, she knew something was terribly wrong. She turned to leave, but the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. Holly spun around, her eyes wide with terror. The wax figures were moving. Elizabeth Bathory's lips curled into a cruel smile, her eyes glinting with malice. Jules de Rise had turned slowly, his gaze locking onto Holly with a predatory gleam. Dracula bared his fangs, his eyes burning with an unholy light. Holly backed away, her mind reeling. "This isn't real," she repeated to herself, but the sight before her was undeniable. The wax figures stepped off their pedestals, their movements jerky at first but growing more fluid with each step. Holly's heart pounded in her chest as she stumbled backwards, desperately searching for an escape. "You awakened us, Holly," Elizabeth Bathory hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "And now we shall have our revenge." Holly turned and ran, her footsteps echoing through the empty museum. She could hear the wax figures following, their movements growing faster, more coordinated. Panic surged through her as she reached the main hall, only to find the doors locked tight. "Help!" she screamed, pounding on the doors. "Somebody help me!" But there was no one to hear her cries. The museum was deserted, and the nearest help was miles away. Holly turned to face her pursuers, her back pressed against the door. Jack the Ripper advanced, his knife gleaming in the dim light. "You can't escape us, Holly," he rasped. "We've been waiting for this moment for centuries." Holly's mind raced, searching for a way out. She spotted the emergency exit sign above a door to her left and made a dash for it, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She burst through the door and into a narrow hallway, the sound of her pursuers' footsteps close behind. She ran through the maze of corridors, her heart pounding in her ears. She could hear the wax figures gaining on her, their inhuman strength and speed closing the gap. Holly's legs burned with exertion, but she pushed herself onward, desperate to escape. Finally, she burst through a door and into the museum's basement. The room was filled with old exhibits and storage crates, a labyrinth of obstacles. Holly ducked behind a stack of crates, trying to catch her breath and formulate a plan. The wax figures entered the basement, their eyes scanning the room. Holly could hear their footsteps growing closer, her heart racing with fear. She needed to find a way to stop them, to end this nightmare once and for all. Her eyes landed on a crate labeled "Flammable Materials." An idea formed in her mind, a dangerous and desperate plan. She crept towards the crate, careful to stay out of sight. She pried it open and found a stash of old lanterns and bottles of kerosene. Holly grabbed a lantern and a bottle, her hands shaking. She doused the surrounding crates with kerosene, the acrid smell filling the air. She could hear the wax figures closing in, their footsteps echoing through the basement. With a deep breath, Holly struck a match and lit the lantern. She held it high, the flickering flame casting eerie shadows on the walls. "Come and get me," she challenged, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. The wax figures advanced, their eyes locked on Holly. She threw the lantern at the kerosene-soaked crates, the glass shattering and igniting the liquid in a burst of flames. The fire spread quickly, the heat and smoke filling the basement. The wax figures recoiled, their movements frantic as the flames licked at their bodies. Holly watched in grim satisfaction as the fire consumed them, their lifelike features melting away to reveal their true, monstrous forms. But the fire was spreading too fast. Holly turned and ran, the flames hot on her heels. She burst through the basement door and into the night air, the cool breeze a stark contrast to the inferno behind her. The museum was ablaze, the fire lighting up the night sky. Holly stumbled to a stop, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She watched as the flames devoured the building, the wax figure screams echoing in her ears. Sirens wailed in the distance, the fire department rushing to the scene. Holly collapsed to the ground, exhaustion and relief washing over her. She had survived, but the horrors of the night would haunt her forever. As the firemen battled the blaze, Holly watched in silence. The museum, her life's work, was gone. But so were the wax figures, their dark secrets and malevolent spirits consumed by the flames. Or so she hoped. In the months that followed, Holly tried to put the nightmare behind her. She moved to a new city, started a new job, and attempted to rebuild her life. But the memories of that night lingered, a constant shadow over her thoughts. One evening, as she walked home from work, she felt a familiar chill in the air. She turned and saw a figure standing in the shadows, watching her with cold, lifeless eyes. Holly's heart skipped a beat as the figure stepped into the light, revealing the unmistakable features of Jack the Ripper. "You can't escape us, Holly," he whispered, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "We're always watching." Holly's blood ran cold as she realized the terrible truth. The wax figures had not been destroyed. They were still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for their chance to strike. And Holly knew, deep in her heart, that she would never be free from their grasp. The days blurred into nights as Holly struggled to comprehend the horror that continued to shadow her life. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, her every move scrutinized by unseen eyes. Paranoia seeped into her daily routine, turning mundane tasks into nerve-wracking ordeals. Desperate for answers, Holly began to research the history of the wax figures. She visited libraries, combed through archives, and interviewed historians, all in search of a clue that might explain their unholy resurrection. One name kept resurfacing: Madame Verna Dubois, a 19th-century occultist and wax sculptor known for her lifelike creations. Madame Dubois had been notorious in her time for her morbid fascination with death and the supernatural. Rumors swirled that she used dark magic to bind the souls of the wicked into her wax figures, preserving their malevolence for eternity. Holly discovered that the figures in her exhibit had all been sculpted by Dubois, their sinister histories intertwined with the sculptor's dark legacy. Holly decided to track down Madame Dubois' last known location, a decrepit mansion on the outskirts of Paris. She hoped to find something, anything, that might help her break the curse. Armed with determination and a suitcase filled with research notes, she boarded a plane to France. The mansion was a dilapidated ruin, its once grand facade now crumbling and overgrown with ivy. Holly pushed open the creaking iron gates and stepped into the overgrown courtyard, her heart pounding with trepidation. She navigated the maze of weeds and rubble until she reached the front door, which groaned ominously as she pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. Cobwebs clung to every surface, and the floorboards creaked underfoot. Holly's flashlight cast eerie shadows on the walls as she explored the darkened rooms. She could almost feel the weight of history pressing down on her, the mansion's grim past whispering secrets in her ear. In the mansion's library, Holly found a collection of Dubois journals, their pages yellowed with age. She pored over the entries, her eyes widening with each revelation. Dubois had indeed used dark magic to animate her wax figures, binding the spirits of the damned into their forms. The key to breaking the curse lay in a ritual that could sever the connection between the figures and their souls. But the ritual required a rare artifact, the Heart of Midnight, a black crystal said to possess immense power. According to Dubois notes, the crystal was hidden in the mansion's basement, guarded by the spirits of the damned. With renewed determination, Holly descended into the basement, her flashlight flickering in the darkness. The air grew colder, and she could hear faint whispers echoing through the stone walls. She felt a presence around her, unseen but palpable, as if the mansion itself were alive and watching her. The basement was a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, each more foreboding than the last. Holly followed the directions in Dubois' journal, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She finally reached a large, iron-bound door, its surface etched with arcane symbols. As she pushed the door open, Holly's flashlight illuminated a large, cavernous chamber. At its center stood a pedestal upon which rested the Heart of Midnight. The crystal pulsed with an otherworldly light, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Holly stepped forward, but a cold, spectral hand grasped her shoulder. "Intruder," a voice hissed in her ear, sending shivers down her spine. Holly spun around, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Ghostly figures emerged from the shadows, their eyes glowing with malevolent intent. The spirits of Dubois victims, bound to the mansion, advanced upon her. Heart-pounding, Holly reached into her bag and pulled out a vial of holy water and a small, silver crucifix. She held them up, her voice steady despite her fear. "By the power of light and purity, I banish you." The spirits recoiled, their forms flickering like candle flames in a breeze. Holly seized the moment and dashed towards the pedestal, grabbing the Heart of Midnight. The crystal's cold surface burned against her skin, but she held on tight, its power thrumming through her veins. The spirits howled in rage, their ghostly forms swirling around her. Holly could feel their cold breath on her neck, their clawed hands reaching for her. She clutched the Heart of Midnight and began to recite the incantation from Dubois' journal, her voice growing stronger with each word. "By the light of the moon and the power of the stars, I sever the ties that bind these souls. Return to the darkness from whence you came." A blinding light erupted from the Heart of Midnight, engulfing the chamber. The spirits screamed, their forms disintegrating into wisps of smoke. Holly felt a surge of energy as the curse was lifted, the oppressive weight that had haunted her finally dissipating. When the light faded, the chamber was empty. The heart of midnight lay dormant in Holly's hand, its power spent. She collapsed to the floor, exhaustion washing over her. In the weeks that followed, Holly returned to her life, the shadows of the past no longer haunting her. She took solace in the knowledge that the curse had been broken, the spirits of the damned finally at peace. But the memory of that night in the mansion never left her. She could still feel the cold grip of the spirits, hear their anguished cries. And though the wax figures were gone, Holly knew that the darkness they represented would always be a part of her story. As she stood at the edge of the Isle of Wight, the sea breeze ruffling her hair, Holly vowed to use her experiences to protect others from the darkness. The world was filled with hidden horrors, and she had faced them head-on. She was no longer just a curator, she was a guardian, standing watch over the line between the living and the dead. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please don't forget to like, and even better, like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and I hope you have had or have a great day.